Playoff time is here, and the Los Angeles Clippers has not waited at all to show us what they're going to be capable of in the playoffs right now. They have a very, very tough and daunting task against the Dallas Mavericks, who, if anybody who's been following my channel for a very long time has known that I am a very high critique on this team, especially with the way that they have historically been playing. Even though that they have gotten a little bit better in terms of passing the ball around now, I can still see a little bit of reminiscent of ball hogging, not much ball movement on their offense, but as the playoffs kind of go and continue, you might see a little bit more ball fluidity. But the Los Angeles Clippers, just out the gate, show that they are the better team in my opinion. I think that this is going to be a very tough series for them just in general. But with their star player Kawhi Leonard being out, you know, they were missing a huge chunk of their production. But with how well coached this team really is, they didn't really miss much from Kawhi Leonard. Everybody put in equal amounts of distribution from their role, and it did not get above from that. And it really starts with one person in particular, and that is James Harden. Because James Harden is the point guard of the team. He has the ball majority of the time when he's on the court. And so one of the issues that tends to arise when James Harden is the point guard and has to get more and more people involved is when he has to call his number. Kenny Smith said it once really, really nice, is that you have to, as a point guard, decide whether or not it is your time to call your number, but it's also whether or not you can say no to other people, because other people has to get involved. So there are times where James Harden has to say no to Paul George, and has to say no to Kawhi Leonard, and has to say no to Terrence Mann, and has to say no to Amir Coffey, and get other people involved. But from the get-go, from the jump, from the gates, James Harden showed that he is able to get as many people involved as possible and still able to kind of call out his number. The first person in the first player that really shined well from this was Ivica Zubac, who had around like 10, 12 points in the first quarter. And that pretty much all came from dimes from James Harden, or from him getting boards and him bringing it back up. But he was way more active, way more involved than he usually is, because James Harden had him in pick and rolls where the Dallas Mavericks did not have an answer for. And I've said this multiple times in my videos, is that for some reason, even though they have the players on the Dallas Mavericks side to kind of like deal with the athleticism of the Clippers, or just in general, they just simply don't have it all together. I don't know why that is, but that just is the case. And Derek Lively was having a very tough time. He was really late on a certain defense assignment. He was not really playing a great defense on Ivica Zubac, and allowed Ivica Zubac to kind of get a nice head start, which gave them a pretty decent lead going into the first quarter. Now, this is doubly as bad when you also recognize that James Harden is not just a passer, but he's also a scorer as well. And many of the Houston fans back in the day know, he can score kind of at will whenever he wants. But the issue with the Los Angeles Clippers version of James Harden is that he is not as fast as he once was, and so getting past his defenders are a little bit tricky. So what he actually started doing is that he's utilizing more of the mid-range game. And so you're starting to see that a little bit more. But my issue with James Harden, and I'll have a specific video just for him, is that he is going to be finicky based on the nature of how he plays. I think that there are a lot of issues when you are revolving on your shot to be the main producer of how you get points. Now, he still has floaters, he still can get to the rim, and that's all great and dandy. But majority of his points come from him shooting. And so what happens when he has a bad shooting night? Also, I do believe that it is very difficult for a person to kind of handle being the point guard of the team and also a scorer of the team. But this is how the Los Angeles Clippers kind of offset that. And they offset that with great role players. And I'm going to get to Paul George a little bit later. But the role players for the Los Angeles Clippers all understand what they need to do, and they don't go outside of that. And that is something, especially if you are a coach, you love to see. The buy-in from Amir Coffey to step up to replace what Kawhi Leonard usually brings, which is offense and defense, but for him to bring so much more production into the actual game, that was great to see. And really that comes down to coaching, and it also comes down to player buy-in. He understands the assignment, and he's a rookie, I'm pretty sure. And so understanding the assignment and getting this, and understanding that this is a really big moment, especially for you, being this is your first playoff game, it was really great to see that Amir Coffey was doing so well. And then you have Terrence Mann, who was one of the best defenders on the court for the whole game. And so having that on your defense, so you're not really losing much on defense, and they're actually playing pretty good rotation defense on the back end, especially when you're not really known for that per se. If you're thinking about like James Harden in particular, but in terms of rotations, they were able to help and rotate back to their man and to force Dallas to get a very tough shot on a closeout or a shot that's not necessarily the best. And then we've also mentioned, Ivica Zubac as well, but it just seems like in general, the team is more focused. They're more bought in. Now, this could be something where it's a little bit of a lightning in a bottle. We might not see this again, but I do believe that this is a really, really, really good sign. And what also I believe is a really good sign is how Paul George played. Now, Paul George had a pretty decent game. Nothing too eye-popping if you're just looking at the scoreboard. Of course, he did what he had to do. But it's the way he was aggressive. Out the gate, you usually see a very, relaxed, smooth Paul George. But he seemed a little bit erratic or ecstatic, I will say. Like, he seemed like a little bit more in tune and into it in the game versus how he usually plays in the regular season. And so he's a little bit quicker, he's a little bit stronger, he's a little bit faster, which can lead to, a couple turnovers here and there, which is something that is to be expected, especially when you're playing at a little bit of a faster pace. And I think this is him being a little bit more antsy. I think he understands the gravity of this moment when it comes to his career, where he's not necessarily in the best predicament, especially knowing that his narrative around the playoffs is not necessarily that great. And so he understands this moment from what I am seeing, and he wanted to make a statement this game. And I think he did. But I think the bigger issue in this series is that the Dallas Mavericks need to kind of figure out what are they going to do. Now, I made a video on this, and I had a lot of people in the comments saying that, hey, listen, this is not the same Dallas Mavericks team. But if you were to watch the game and you actually see how the way they played, it's very reminiscent on how they were playing from the beginning of the year. And I said this in the comment section below, and I said, listen, I understand that they're passing the ball a little bit more towards the end of the year, but I'm going off of what they have historically done the whole season. And I didn't really see anything different, right? You had Kyrie Irving go off, and Luka had a very tough game. But that's the game plan. Let those two players, listen, we're going to make it difficult on those two players regardless. But those are the only two players who are going to beat us. Everybody else out of the situation, out of the scenario, because they're just not going to get as much touches or have enough flow within their offense for them to even feel like they're good enough to play within the game for real, or get enough rhythm for them to actually be efficient in the game for real. I mean, this is a team where we have always seen that they're not necessarily the best when it comes to getting their role players involved if it does not involve Luka Doncic. And so the Dallas Mavericks are going to have to figure out how are you going to attack this style of defense, this aggressiveness on the Los Angeles Clippers side. What are you going to do to even stop their offense? We haven't even talked about that because it seems like the Clippers are firing on all cylinders. They're one of the stronger teams in the league right now, especially with how they're playing in the first game. But if they go down 2-0, this is going to be a very difficult series for the Dallas Mavericks to really bring back. But the biggest elephant in the room is that Kawhi Leonard is not on the court. He's still dealing with some issues with his body. And he usually takes it a good decent amount of time before he actually gets back on the court. But let's just say that they're still in this series. What are the Mavs going to do when he gets back on the court? Not only offensively, because offensively it's very difficult for him to be stopped. There's nobody that they can have on him that will not take away from anybody else. If you put your best defender on Kawhi, well, then you leave, the weaker defenders on Paul George and James Harden. And then Luka Doncic will be the person that they attack every single time to tire him out because he does so much on the offensive end that he doesn't really have that much energy on the defensive end. And just outside of that, really effort is on the defensive end, which is the problem for Luka Doncic, in my opinion. But when you think about, okay, well, what happens when Kawhi Leonard is guarding Luka Doncic as well? Now, that's the biggest crux of the issue because you're having the best defender on the team, also surrounded by, Terrence Mann, Paul George, and the others who are able to switch 1 through 3 and have a pretty decent time in defending that, and how great that they are in terms of playing help side defense when it comes to the pick and roll. And so Kawhi Leonard is going to have a really, really easy job. I think with the way that the team is rolling right now, there's not much you can ask him to do that won't be outside the realm of his grasp. But this all spells doom for the Dallas Mavericks because the Dallas Mavericks does not have an answer for all of these problems that the Clippers are showing. And I think with the prowess of James Harden and Paul George, and then whenever they get Kawhi Leonard back, you're going to see a very, very easy series for the Los Angeles Clippers.